All right, it's 2:45. We're going to get started. Looks like there's still some people filing in. We'll just move forward, and I'm sure they'll catch up when they get here. Welcome. My name is Carmen Summers. I'm a senior program manager on the System Center team. And today, we're going to explore the evolution of System Center, how it's evolving, how we're helping with supportability, simplification, and upgrade. When you leave here today, my intention is that you will understand, one, how to think about us as a product, how we're evolving, what is Service Pack 1, and how to plan for it, how you should think about it. Understand how System Center is streamlining, making steps towards becoming a product, not just a name, but an actual product. Understand the how and why of how you go about planning for upgrading System Center. And know and understand some information about SQL correlation, about the coexistence of databases, about the coexistence of components themselves. And lastly, there's two things lastly. One is talk about the configuration analyzer that just released earlier this month, and also about update roll-ups. So this is going to be probably about a 60-minute talk. I'm going to leave the last 15 minutes as an opportunity for you guys to ask questions. There's supposed to be 268 people in this room, but I'm kind of glad that it's a smaller audience so we can have a more interactive session. I'm not going to be doing a demo in this session, just simply because upgrading System Center, if you're running every component, is going to take a while. So I'm going to give you all the information that you need to know to plan for this. But what I want to first understand is, how many of you are running System Center 2012 today? How many of you are running multiple components that are integrated together? Okay. How many of you know about the upgrade sequencing documentation on TechNet today? Okay. How many of you begun that, started it? Okay. Well, that gives me a good idea. And how many of you haven't started but are using this as a session to plan for that, help you plan? Okay, great. This is going to give you the information you need to know. You're going to go back armed and ready and be able to perform what you need to do and plan for it correctly. So, see this guy? I don't know his name, but he's the look that most customers give us when they go, yeah, System Center's a product now. And they go, oh, really? Well, tell me, how are you a product? How are you becoming a product? So I'm going to change that look that most people give us to something that's a little bit better. So last year we announced System Center becoming a product. Okay? Well, let's take a look at the history of Office. When Office started out, you had Word. Then they released Microsoft Office. And what they did was they took PowerPoint, Word, Excel, and called it, slapped a label on it, and said Microsoft Office. Not integrated, but it was a suite of products. Today, we have Office 2010. How many of you know how long it took to get from where we were back then to today? A long time. It takes time. And so my intention here is to help you understand that it's a roadmap. Just slapping a label on something doesn't change us overnight. And engineering something to become a product takes time. And so your patience, and with your patience and your help and your feedback, we're going to get better every day. So what you have in our suite of products, as you know, is Operations Manager, Service Manager, Data Protection Manager, Config Manager, VMM, Endpoint Protection. New in SP1 is Orchestrator SPF. That is System Center. DPM, is DPM on there? Oh, there, Data Protection Manager. That is System Center. The way to think about it is, let me just go back for a second. System Center is the product. Each of those individual components that I showed you are no longer called products. They're called components. They're components of the product. So when you hear the terminology of people talking about a component, you understand why we changed that language, because we have to refer to System Center as the product, and the functionality that's enabled by OM or VMM are components of the product. So Service Pack 1. As you know, right on the heels of 2012, we released 2012 SP1. And what this gave you was we lit up Windows Server 2012, and it added support for Windows Server 2012. So how can you think about Service Pack 1? You can think about it as a piece of major functionality. It is probably a service pack only in name. Who decides that name? Not me. But I can tell you that what I'm here to tell you is that think about it as an upgrade, okay? It's not your traditional, I download a service pack from SP1, from Moo, and I install it. It is not that. It is an actual upgrade per component. The requirements for this upgrade, in most cases, are you don't have to upgrade OS, with the exception of VMM. How many of you know that VMM requires an OS upgrade? Okay. How many of you know why? We could, not you, Johnny. You work on the product team, you don't count, sorry. We took a dependency on the SMIS provider. It wasn't backported from Windows Server 2012 to 2008 R2 on the OS. So VMM, in order to enable some of the storage features in Windows Server 2012 and light that up, we had to take a dependency on that. So understanding that the VMM upgrade itself, it will require an upgrade, will help you plan for that. Also, you're going to need to do this in a sequence if you have an expectation to maintain operations. Obviously, you're running production environments. You want to make sure that your environments stay up and running. You want to make sure that OM can still talk to VMM, and Service Manager still has this connector to Config Manager. And if you follow this sequence, you will have that capability to maintain operations during a rolled, staged migration that you plan over time. So here's that look again. This guy says, you know what, here's some of the customer complaints that I'm going to tell you about, that I'm hearing. We get this from the MVPs, we get this from the community forums, we get this from our TAP customers. We just get it in general. And this was the feedback that resonated all the way up to the top. And these were the things that we knew that we could tackle in SP1. So these are the things I'm going to be talking about today. One, the system requirements for System Center all over the map. I want to install, config. I want to install VMM, and I want to use SQL 2008 R2 SP1. But then somebody else, or 2008, but then somebody else, if I install App Controller, it requires 2008 R2, SQL 2008 R2 SP1. So we were inconsistent and all over the maps, all over the map. Also, customers said to us, I have no idea what order to upgrade these things in. Can you help me, product group? And we said, no, we can't. But now we can, because we're thinking like a product. And to me, that's refreshing, because I want to know that if I sell you something or I help you implement something in production, that I'm giving you a path to get you to the next version. Also, customers said, I just want to set up a simple POC, proof of concept. What System Center components can I deploy on one box? Guess what? Product team didn't know. But now we do. We've done that testing. We're going to give you that information. We're going to tell you what can and can't coexist. And I'm going to tell you why. And then databases. How many of you experienced the SQL correlation nightmare with System Center and know a lot about it? Okay. Well, we're making progress there. And that's not going to change overnight. But I'm going to talk about some of the changes that you see in SP1 that we made from 2012 and understanding how correlation is set. Just understanding that information will probably help you a lot. So the first thing I want to talk about is that we're going to dive deep now. The System Center requirements simplified. The project was basically, like I said, Customer says, I don't know what to choose. You're all over the map. At the top, this is probably kind of, I hope you can see it. So what I did was, this was my project, and I took all the System Center content pages off of TechNet, and I put them all in a big spreadsheet and aggregated them into a single location. And then I took a look at them across the board, and what you come up with is on top. This all over the place, nobody's consistent. How can we expect our customers to use this? This is crazy. You know, just me looking at it. So I met with the leadership team, and I said, we need to do something about this. And so what we decided was, we took some initial cuts. We chose the common denominators, and we came up with the below list for, we've standardized server-side OS support, SQL, client, agents, PowerShell, .NET, web consoles. This is all available in a single place on TechNet. So if you're looking for, hey, I want to go implement System Center tomorrow, you don't have to go look at OM system requirements and VMM system requirements and app controller system requirements. It's in one place. And I know, and it's formatted the same, which means that if you look at VMM system requirements or OM system requirements, you ever know the pattern is different? Like some people do it in paragraph format, some people do it in tables. Totally inconsistent. So this is a tool that will help you quickly reference, okay, I want to deploy System Center and I want to figure out, you know, what SQL version I want to put it on. Boom, right there in front of your face, you have all the components listed. No need to go anywhere else. So I really hope this makes a difference for you when you're planning out System Center, and we will continue to move forward with this type of model. The next one is the upgrade sequence. And we're going to go pretty deep into this. So I'm going to give you a lot of information, but I want you to understand that how we came about this order. So you'll have a deep understanding. So when you go back, you can think about it when you're planning your upgrade sequence. Essentially, my goal was to enable a rolling sequenced upgrade, meaning that I need to figure out what order VMM, who goes first, who goes second. If I upgrade OM and I have a connection to VMM, what's going to happen? You know, we couldn't answer that question before. We didn't actually know. So what this project allowed us to do was spend some time thinking about, okay, well, how do I get you from point A to point B and still have you be able to have functional components at the end of an upgrade? And so we're going to dive deep into understanding this. So when you buy System Center today, it's shiny and new. It's like that car. You know, everybody likes it. It's like, oh, it's so pretty. You touch it. You take it out for a test drive. You implement it. You know, and you're so happy. And you're like on top of the world. You're like, yeah, I got System Center and everything's great. And then we put out SP1 and we say, hey, well, now that you've connected everything, you're going to upgrade this. What this is, and this is available on TechNet. How many of you have seen this on TechNet? Okay, if you haven't, Johnny, you don't count. if you haven't, you should download this. It's a 11 by 17 poster. You probably need a bigger printer. You can size it down. But essentially, this tells you all the connections that can exist between each component in System Center. So if you set up integration between OM and VMM, or if you set up integration between Orchestrator and all the other components with the integration packs, if you set up OM monitoring, I mean, I call this the spaghetti map, but it is really interconnected. And so you have to make sure that when we're upgrading this, that we respect these connections and we maintain these connections. So part of figuring out how System Center was connected was essentially documenting it here so that we, from an engineering perspective, could actually see that. Because I don't think anybody ever did that before. We actually had some MVPs. I think Damian Flynn, he actually tried, multiple MVPs tried to take a crack at this. You know, they got me started. They got a good idea of how it connected. And so I took what they started with and essentially developed this on top of it to say, here's how it really looks from a deep level integration standpoint. Every piece of connection that exists between management packs, integration packs, service connectors, agents, that includes DPM agents, OM agents, config manager agents. I mean, it is vast. So the order is, and we're going to dive deep into each of these, is orchestrator, service manager, DPM, operations manager, configuration manager, virtual machine manager, and app controller at the same time. And I'm going to help you understand why. But in order to ensure you have success, these are some Uber-level rules that you should follow. 1, read my documentation and follow the prescribed guidance. I know, as a sysadmin, how many of you are sysadmins in this room? What do we like to do? I mean, back in the day, okay, I'm going to date myself a little bit. We get the CD out, we stick it in, and we install it, right? Everything goes honky-dory until something goes wrong. And then you go back and you read the release notes and all the documentation to figure out what went wrong. Because we have sort of an innate faith that it's just going to, I'm going to put it in there, I'm going to hit that setup exe, and it's going to work. And when I joined the product group, I realized for the first time that they actually write those release notes and those documentation for a reason, and I should probably read them. It really never occurred to me before, but so these are the follow prescribed guidance. Don't deploy new components. So if you're upgrading and you want to hook up, deploy SPF, wait till after you're done with the upgrade sequence. Do not perform DB upgrades. Stay where you are. Wait till after you upgrade. My first and only thing that I care about is helping you maintain operations during this upgrade. And these rules will help you succeed. So do not perform OS upgrades during your upgrade unless you're mandated. The only component that requires you to do an OS upgrade is VMM. So determining sequence order was not an easy task. If you think about System Center before 2012, we were operations manager, we were service manager, we were orchestrator, Opalis. Each of them were designed in a silo. While we all talked to each other and we wanted to integrate, we said we were a suite of products, we all designed like, when I install SQL, I'm the only database in the world. That was the thought. When I upgrade, I only have to worry about me, getting myself upgraded, getting the individual component upgraded. Well, as System Center 2012 came out and we started to more tightly integrate with that map you saw, determining who should go first in the sequence order, it was really challenging. Because Service Manager, you talk to them and they think they go first. You talk to OM, you think they go first. You talk to Orchestrator, they think they go first. They were all designed with backward compatibility in mind, meaning that I'm going to upgrade and I'm going to assume that every other component or product is going to go after me. Well, that doesn't work because I can't have you owning a production environment, upgrading OM, Orchestrator, and Service Manager all at once. That would be crazy. So the chicken and the egg problem of who goes first was really a problem. So we looked at the top three: Service Manager, Operations Manager, and Orchestrator. These three components alone share the most connections in System Center. With Orchestrator, you have the integration packs. With Operations Manager, you have the management packs. And with Service Manager, it has multiple service connectors. So Orchestrator, we started looking at these three, determining who would be the first. Orchestrator in itself, the integration packs, Orchestrator itself is designed to have integration packs that are backward compatible, meaning if I upgrade Orchestrator to SP1, I can run 2012 integration packs and I can run SP1 integration packs side by side as long as they're different components. So that solved that problem. It's like, oh, okay, well, if I upgrade Orchestrator first, then when everybody else upgrades, they just upload their new SP1 integration packs. Well, we discovered a problem. Service Manager designed their connectors to be backward compatible, meaning that, so if I upgrade Orchestrator and then if I upgrade Service Manager first, then my connection with Orchestrator will fail. So vice versa, they're not forward compatible. So solving the problem, we had to dig deep and down and to see if, who would go first in this scenario. Service packs, if we upgrade Service Manager first, all the connections below it with Orchestrator would fail. So we have the runbook connector between Orchestrator and Service Manager. And we tested seeing if we could actually do the upgrade, and it succeeded. And why it succeeded was because the web service that connects Orchestrator and Service Manager is on a web service, uses a web service SDK. That took no changes between 2012 and SP1. So it breaks the rule. We can upgrade Orchestrator before Service Manager, and that integration, the connector for the runbook connector, will continue to work, even though it doesn't follow the rule that Service Manager connectors are forward compatible. So the results is, what if I do this out of order? If you do this out of order, if you upgrade any component before Orchestrator, you will not be able to run your 2012 SP1 integration pack. And the connection with your current integration pack that's still loaded on the 2012 Orchestrator, it will no longer work. So your solution is get the other components upgraded. There's no other workaround. I'm hoping that you're going to follow this so you don't end up in this predicament. On the left side of this chart, you'll see that these are all the connections shared. I showed you that big map, right? But now I'm going to break it down. These are all the fingers that Orchestrator has in System Center. It shares with Operations Manager, it shares an integration pack, it has an OM agent, and it has the OM console loaded on it so that the integration pack will work with OM. With Service Manager, it has a connector and an integration pack. With Config Manager, it has an integration pack. You're probably managing the computer that Orchestrator lives on with a CM agent and possibly an endpoint protection agent as well. With Virtual Machine Manager, it shares an integration pack, and with DPM, an integration pack. So bottom line, Orchestrator always goes first in this sequence. How many of you run Orchestrator today and have other components connected to it? Okay, good. So I'm hopeful this will help you. Service Manager. Service Manager shares also a number of connections within System Center. It shares 2 connectors with Config Manager, potentially, if you set them up. It shares the SM machine can have a CM agent and an endpoint protection agent. With Operations Manager, it shares 2 connectors, a management pack, and this is actually inaccurate because, in SM, SP1, they enabled agent-based monitoring for OM. So it now shares an agent. For Orchestrator, you have a runbook connector it shares and an integration pack. So why is it number 2 in the order? Number 2 in the order is that Service Manager designed their connectors to be backward compatible, meaning that I can upgrade it and I can still connect to components that are still at the 2012. So the only exception to this is the Orchestrator runbook. So because of the many connections it shares, it comes in second in the upgrade sequence. So what if you upgrade the component out of this order? What if you upgrade VMM before this or OM? The connectors will fail. You might luck out. You might test it yourself and say, hey, this still kind of works, but there's some deprecated functionality. Ultimately, it's not a supported path. And so you'd want to get your other components upgraded so that the connectors would give you full functionality. Data Protection Manager. So Data Protection Manager, it actually has some flexibility. How many of you run DPM here? One person. Okay. You have some flexibility with DPM. If you run the central console functionality in DPM, it needs to go before Operations Manager. However, if you are not running that functionality, the only stipulation here is that it must come after Orchestrator, after Service Manager, but before VMM. Why is that? Because the DPM, if you upgrade DPM before VMM, and if you upgrade VMM before DPM, see, it's confusing, isn't it? If you upgrade VMM before DPM, because VMM requires an OS upgrade, the DPM will not have an agent to put on Windows Server 2012, so you won't be able to back anything up. So if you're not running Central Console functionality, it can go second or third in the order. The connections that it shares is it shares the console, the Central Console functionality integrated right into OM. It shares an Orchestrator integration pack, and potentially you could be managing the CM, the DPM box with a CM agent and endpoint protection. Operations Manager. Also, when I talked to the product team, they felt that they were first in this sequence. They always design themselves to be first, but what we found through our research is that because management packs are not designed to be forward compatible. As you know, whenever we release a product, we always release a new version of the management pack. So we had to figure out, well, okay, if Orchestrator and Service Manager and potentially DPM go before this, will these management packs still work? The question is the answer is yes. You will still have management packs that work if you upgrade, when you upgrade Operations Manager. So the rule set here is what if I upgrade this out of order? What if I do everything and then do OM last? You're really going to severely impact your monitoring capability within System Center. So that's why it comes third in this order. DPM fourth. So it shares CM agent, Endpoint Protection Manager. It shares a connector with VMM where you have to load the OM console on VMM to enable that connection. How many of you have VMM OM integration set up? Okay, good. It shares an integration pack with Orchestrator. It shares a Central Console server components, as I mentioned before. And with App Controller, it has a management pack, an Orchestrator integration pack, and a management pack. So it's loaded. It has a lot of fingers out there in the environment. Configuration Manager. Configuration Manager, it must follow Orchestrator, Operations Manager, and Service Manager, simply because of the connectors, the IPs, and the MPs. We tested it. Those connectors, they will fail. They may appear to work initially, but I wouldn't risk a production environment, so they will fail. It's important to note that you must if you have Config Manager managing VMM and you upgrade VMM first, you won't be able to manage it anymore because VMM requires an OS upgrade, and Config Manager added support for Windows Server 2012 with the SP1. So it shares a number of connections. It has its agents all over the place. How many of you using Config Manager and it's integrated with other components? Okay. So Virtual Machine Manager and App Controller. These guys are basically intertwined. They require, the good news is that App Controller is small. The upgrade is pretty painless, and why do they have to go at the same time? There is a hard-coded dependency between the version of VMM and App Controller. So if you were to upgrade App Controller without upgrading VMM, it does a version check, and you will not be able to reestablish that integration. Granted, if you're not running the connection with VMM, say for instance you have all other System Center components installed and you just use App Controller for your connection into Azure, no big deal. But if you expect it to maintain operations between VMM, you need to do them at the same time. Virtual Machine Manager on Virtual Machine Manager, it has a number of connections into System Center. Mostly those connections are coming in to, by Config Manager with the agent, the integration pack, the management packs. VMM actually runs the OM console for the SDK integration that it needs to set up that connection between VMM and OM. And then App Controller, it has an SDK connection. And so on App Controller, you have to load the VMM console, which gives you the SDK functionality. So for that reason, these guys are hard-coded, dependent on each other, and must go at the same time. So this is a bit of an eye chart, but this chart, if you are thinking about, if you're new to System Center, or you have one component and you want to implement a new version, you want to implement App Controller, or you want to implement Service Manager, and you want to start out with SP1, you can take a look at this and you say, well, if I have Orchestrator 2012 SP1 in my environment, but I'm running Config Manager 2012, can I integrate them? If you look, does my pointer work here? If you look here, you'll see the answer is yes. If I'm running VMM 2012 and I want to integrate with Orchestrator 2012 SP1, the answer is yes. So the chart will help you understand and plan for, if you're introducing something new into your environment, what we support in terms of what will work if you go to the different version levels. This is available on TechNet in the same place that you would find the upgrade sequencing information. And I have links at the end of this for those of you who don't know about it. So let's talk a bit about SQL Server. This was a big pain for customers because, one, we had our version support of SQL was all over the place. So as new components were coming online with 2012, some of them were only requiring SQL Server 28 R2, and some of them were carrying support like older products like OM and Config Manager and DPM and VMM that had been around for a while. Some of them were making their own decisions about when to drop and add support, which created this really inconsistent model. And for some of you in the enterprise, you use SQL farms, right? How many of you use SQL farms in your environment and your DBA just says, give me your SQL requirements? Well, if you had to implement all the System Center components, you'd have to say, well, I hope you have a SQL farm that's got SQL 2008 and a SQL farm that's got R2 SP1, because these are my requirements. So it became quite a bit of a nightmare for our customers, and so we hear it a lot. And so we're attempting, this is not an easy thing to solve. It requires a lot of engineering work to make these changes, and a lot of changes at a deep product level. So the first thing we did was try to align for SP1 the SQL versions we support. So you can go to your DBA and say, hey, I need to implement System Center tomorrow, and if you have SQL Server 2008 R2 SP1, or you have SQL Server 2012 farm, those are what I need. The exception in this case on the client side is Config Manager. They still support SQL Server 2008. We made these decisions based upon market research, so not everybody fell into the 80% of customers who were at this version level and had this level of SQL. Config Manager is a much larger install base, so there's some leniency there to the policy, and so we felt that it made sense. So the correlation, when you feed requirements to your DBA, he's going to ask you, well, especially if you're implementing in different languages. Service Manager supports 25 languages. System Center supports 19. If you think about how collation can, if the collation is set not the same between components, meaning that I set something at the SQL instance level or I set it at the DB level, you can potentially cause impact, especially if you're going to coexist databases within the same SQL instance. So for example, I'm going to walk through this chart, and I'm going to try to help you understand how the collation is set. So when you're planning this, you'll have this information. So when you think about VMM and you talk about installing VMM, when we place the database on SQL, we set collation at the DB level. Do you know what that means? That means that VMM is sort of self-contained. It doesn't inherit anything from the instance, the SQL instance. So what that means is that you can technically coexist that database with any other database. Granted, performance, you're going to want to do some SQL planning for performance, but coexistence of this database will give you the ability to coexist it with other components who share this policy. Operations Manager. When you install OM, it validates that you have set the appropriate SQL collation on the instance. It won't let you install unless you have it set correctly. So say, for instance, you were installing OM and VMM within the same SQL instance. You can do that because VMM sets its collation within its own database. And then you can set the SQL instance to what OM requires, so the installation will succeed and they can comfortably coexist. Would I do that in a production environment with SP1 today managing 25,000 VMs and 1,000 hosts at VMM today? No, not for performance reasons. I would not do that. But you can do it for proof of concepts and simplicity if you're doing those type of things. For the data warehouse and for data warehouse for OM, same sort of policy, they check. For service manager management, they also validate the instance is set up appropriately with their requirements. So OM and SM, they actually come from, this is tidbit, they come from the same code path, meaning that they were once intertwined and so they carry a lot of the same characteristics for the code paths that lie below them that run the engines. So what that creates is sometimes DLLs, they can't coexist together. SM and OM cannot coexist together on the same box or within the same SQL instance. They just can't. It's not recommended. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't try it. It validates that the SQL instance is set to the appropriate thing. It doesn't set it for you. It validates it. When the database is placed in the SQL instance, it inherits. We're going to skip down to the same for the data warehouse and the service manager web parts and portal. For orchestrator, they use SQL collation and they set it at the DB level. So orchestrator and VMM can reside in the same SQL instance with OM if you wanted to, because they set at the DB level. So does this help you guys understand this? Or I'm hopeful this is really useful information for you. So it's a lot to wrap your brain around because SQL collation, it just isn't easy. App controller, they're agnostic to collation because they're so small. They don't care. They set it. They'll inherit whatever you say. So it can live anywhere. It can live in any of the instances you choose. For DPM, when you install DPM, they actually install SQL for you. So DPM, it is a sort of self-contained in today's state. So it installs SQL for you. It sets its own collation. It sets it at the instance level, and we recommend that you let it remain that way. It doesn't. You can't even put it on a shared SQL farm because it doesn't support that today. So component coexistence with previously dedicated. So when we thought about System Center before, I'm going to show you a map. Okay, anybody ever seen this? This is from Fast Track program. This is how we tell customers to set up SQL farm for supporting all System Center databases. Do you see how many instances? The blue here is all the instances of SQL that are required. You know why it's that way? Because the product group didn't know. We didn't know because we just became a product, and so now we're actually taking a look at it. And this is hard. This is hard for customers to overcome. This is like 1, 2, 3, 4, like 7 or 8 different instances of SQL running on a farm. This is a recommended configuration. Look how many LUNs you require. That's 20 LUNs. You're going to run out of the alphabet pretty soon if we add some more. So we know we can do better, and we are looking at it. And so with SP1, you see that we've been able to, based upon the studies that we've done and the research we've done on collation, we're now able to collapse and coexist some of the databases. You see here how I have VMM in its own database, in its own SQL instance. I have it in its own SQL instance because if you, with VMM moving from 2012 to SP1, we actually increased the number of hosts we support and the number of VMs. So in SP1, we went from 1,000, we went to 1,000 hosts and 25,000 virtual machines. So the workload profile on VMM is going to become larger on SQL. So it's something you should know. Going from managing 400 hosts and 8,000 VMs to upping that to 1,000 hosts and 25,000 VMs means the database is going to be more tasked. The workload profile is going to become greater. So for performance reasons, in this instance, if you plan on running 1,000 hosts and 25,000 VMs, you should have its own dedicated SQL instance on the farm. But if you're not in that predicament, you could certainly place it in one of these centralized instances, and it can share. It can live anywhere because of the way collation is set. It's agnostic. So component coexistence. A lot of customers came to me and said, hey, you know, I want to do a POC, and I want to get System Center quickly deployed, and how many boxes do I need, and how many servers do I need, and what can coexist and what can't? And I couldn't answer that because it wasn't something we tested. So this is actually supported today in 2012 in SP1. We tested this. So this is information that's available in TechNet that if you were to implement System Center 2012 today, the component coexistence would look like this. You would need a total of 4 systems if you wanted to do a POC. And on those 4 systems, you could deploy, you can coexist app controller, orchestrator, and VMM on a single system. You could deploy app controller, orchestrator, and VMM with any of the roles listed above. But you must have dedicated boxes for DPM, OM, SM, and SM data warehouse. So total of 4 boxes with some flexibility for installing app controller, orchestrator, and VMM on any of those 4 systems. So you got 4 machines, virtual machines, hopefully, that you're implementing this on for a POC that you could fully provision out System Center in. It's much better than the 22 we had recommended to you. So, System Center Configuration Analyzer. We released this. How many of you use the BPA, the Best Practice Analyzer for VMM? Orchestrator? Okay, if you don't know about it, the Best Practice Analyzer, if you're having an issue in your environment, it is the first thing you should do before you call CSS, before you call Premier Support. What it does is we engineer this. It releases after RTM, and in previous versions you had to download, one for one for orchestrator, one for VMM, and not all components had it. So when I was a customer and I had a problem, I would download this, I'd run it against my environment, and what it's engineered to do is find low-hanging fruit so you don't have to call CSS and spend the money on that support call. In fact, I use it sometimes even when I'm building out an environment and something goes wrong. I download, in previous versions, I would download the specific component configuration analyzer, run it against it, and it would find low-hanging fruit. I've actually blogged about how it helped me in last year's MMS find an issue with my demo environment. So it is a useful tool. For 2012 SP1, we released a consolidated best practice analyzer, a single one that represents System Center, the product. So this is, again, reaching back to the changes that we're making to become a product. In small places, it's an evolution, but we're on this roadmap where we're trying to make changes where we can. And this is one area where we could make the change. So as a customer, you can download this if you're having a problem with any component, configuration manager, VMM, Service Manager, DPM, SPF. There's rules for every component with the exception of App Controller, and those are forthcoming. So you download this. You download the Microsoft Best Practice Configuration Analyzer engine first as a prerequisite. You simply load the model, which is essentially what we've created. You load it up. Have you used the Active Directory BPA or the DNS BPA? Similar if you've used that. You load it up, you run it against your environment, and it will find the low-hanging fruit. And on TechNet, we actually documented every rule that we run so that you will know that we're not just out there randomly running, various things in your environment that you don't want us to do. We document it on TechNet, and so it identifies the low-hanging fruit for you that you can use to troubleshoot your environment quickly. I can't tell you how much feedback I've received from customers saying, oh, this saved me a call to CSS, and thank you. And we do update this iteratively. Now, the good thing about this is how many of you saw the announcement this week about Advisor, the add-in for OM for Advisor? So the beautiful thing about this is that the BPA tool is a static tool. It's an out-of-band tool that we have to release as part of our releasing. But the rules, we have to update it every quarter, and we have to add new rules in. With the Advisor service, we're taking the rules that are in the BPA and putting those into the Advisor engine. So those rules will be automatically ported in there. So the availability of the tool for people who don't use Advisor will still be out there. But if you wanted a more timely, iterative way to get these best practices or these, how these rules get created is somebody calls into CSS and says, I have this problem. We solved the problem. Maybe it was a KB that fixed it. Maybe it was something that just, we found the root cause and it's a low-hanging fruit. Well, we add these rules in, and so that you don't have to basically call in and be paying $200 or $300 for a support call when it's already a known issue. So we take the issues that have the most call generation and feed these into the BPA and to help you customers. And we're also feeding them into Advisor. And Advisor will be more iteratively and faster updates. So if you haven't tried it out, I'd recommend giving it a try because System Center Advisor will be a more iterative tool for you to take advantage of. So the last thing I want to talk about today is update rollups. So how many of you have seen our update rollups that have been coming out since System Center 2012 release, the consolidated KBs? How many of you have installed them? Okay. So before System Center 2012, before we rebranded the product, each component within System Center had their own sustained engineering. And sustaining engineering is how we release patches, just like Windows sustained engineering release patches. So what happens is that you have people who report bugs, and essentially you develop fixes and you release them out. Well, when you're releasing out a fix for DPM, a fix for OM, a fix for SM, a fix for VMM, and they're all going on different windows, customers say to us, how can I keep track of this? I don't even know where to begin. What is your baseline? There's no way to consistently track baselines, especially if you're releasing not at the same time. If you're releasing out of sequence, like if I'm releasing in March, you're releasing in April. Customer said, that's nonsense. You need to give us a more discoverable, more consistent, and more accessible way to get these. So we made some changes. Update rollups are essentially the primary release mechanism that we utilize within System Center, and I believe this is mostly on the data center side. The client side is also moving to a cumulative update rollup model. You'll hear us refer to cumulative update and update rollup sort of interchangeably. They mean the same thing, but the terminology, if you release through Microsoft Update, you have to use the word update rollup. If you release through DLC or want some flexibility there, you can call it anything you want, and sometimes they'll call it cumulative updates. SQL calls it cumulative updates. I think Exchange does too. It's sort of inconsistent, but in reality, it means the same thing to you. It's an update rollup. So each update rollup will release we will release quarterly updates. So 4 times a year, you can expect to get updates from us. I mean, if there's 4 trains, and generally they run once every quarter. And we have been consistent. Since System Center 2012 is released, we have released 5 update roll-ups on schedule each time. System Center 2012 SP1 released in January. It actually became available for volume licensed customers on TechNet earlier than that, but was available to GA in January, and we actually released it, the UR1, Update Rollup 1, in January. This past Tuesday, yesterday, we released Update Rollup 2 for System Center 2012 SP1 and Update Rollup 5 for System Center 2012. So what I think this shows is, and I've read some blog feedback on this, is we're committed to delivering fixes to you. And this gives our teams a consistent way to get these fixes to you. It also enables you to have a single reference KB article to reference the material, so you know the baseline. So you can say, okay, I have all the information I need to know, and in Update Rollup 2 for System Center 2012 SP1, OM released updates, Orchestrator released updates, Service Manager, cross-plat, Linux, Unix integration on OM, App Controller released updates, and you have a single KB article. How many of you have used that? If you haven't, there's a blog post here on it. You can reference it, download it. There's also a link to the KB article. You can search it on Bing Search, because I know that's what we all use, to search for Systems Update Rollup 2 for System Center 2012 SP1. I think that, you know, the goal here is that it makes it consistent and you have a baseline. The last thing I want to tell you about is, have you noticed that we're now delivering more and more components on Microsoft Update? So we used to have this inconsistent model where some components would release on DLC, Download Center, some components would release on Microsoft Update. It was all over the board. In the past year, we've worked very hard to get all components releasing on Microsoft Update. And what that means is, for enterprises, you now have the capability to download these to your WSUS environment and distribute them. If you're using Config Manager for update management, or you're using VMM for update management for your host, it gives you a consistent way to manage these and a consistent path. The only exception the only component that is not yet on Service Manager on Microsoft Update is Service Manager, but we're working on that. And it's on the roadmap to get them also aligned. Management packs, however, will continue to be placed on the catalog as they are today. So I'm hopeful that with this understanding, you understand that you will continue to get update quarterly releases as volume mandates it, and they will be consistent, and we have a commitment to make sure that you're getting the fixes you need to make your environments run efficiently. So there's a couple helpful resources here in the deck. The first one is a link to the System Center 2012 SP1 requirements. The second one is the upgrade sequence. There's also there's the order by which you do it in. And then once you're in the component itself, say for instance you go to Orchestrator first, you follow the upgrade guidance documented in Orchestrator. The sequence is merely by which the order in which you should do it, and some things you need to do before and after the sequence to reestablish communication. So you're still going to follow, while you're in a component, you're still going to follow their upgrade requirements and sequence, and their sequence for the internal mechanism of upgrading OM, where you upgrade the gateway and you upgrade the management servers and that kind of stuff. The last link is the System Center. In upgrade sequence, there's also the bottom of that article. There is understanding the sequence, and it tells you about the ramifications more in-depthly than I went over today about what happens if I do this or what happens if I do that, so you can understand and plan for it. So you don't have to memorize everything I said today. This is all documented on TechNet. The configuration analyzer, if you've never used it, you know, and you're using System Center, it's good just to go out there and download it and run it against your environment and see if you can find anything, because you know what, it could prevent an outage. And I know we want to prevent those, because I like to maintain operations. I come from an ops background, and I know that's extremely important to you, especially when you're running a critical infrastructure like System Center. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I think I talked a little fast, so there's related sessions here. Some of you have probably already been to these. It's Wednesday. These are the sessions that I recommend you attend. Take a look at how many of you attended Vijay Tiwari's session on Monday? Overview of System Center 2012, VMM? Okay. So I'm going to open up to questions. There may be some questions that I can't answer, but I'm going to give it my best. And if I can't, I will take your name and I will get you the answer. So I'm going to open up to questions. We have about 15 minutes. And I want to thank you all for coming out today. And I really hope this was a valuable session for you. I know that a lot of times you go to these sessions and you expect to see some whiz-bang demo. But this is critical information that will really help you. And I think that with this information, you'll be armed and ready to go back to have a successful migration. So, thank you.